The afternoon Jesse Vance knocked on the Miller door. Silas opened it with a rifle. The boy didn't flinch, didn't step back, just stood there in the cold winter sun with his hat in his hands, looking at the barrel the way a man looks at something he's already decided not to be afraid of. "I saw your wheel," Jesse said, "and your barn roof. I can fix both. I don't want money, just somewhere dry and something hot." Silas kept the rifle where it was. It was Clara who spoke. "Grandfather," she said. Quiet, just that one word. The rifle came down. What Silas did not say, standing in that doorway, was that 3 days earlier a man named Holloway had ridden up that same drive with 2 large men behind him and an offer in his coat pocket, an offer that was not really an offer, because offers give you a choice. And what Holloway had been presenting to the Miller family for the past 8 months was something closer to a countdown. Sell now, at his price, before the winter made their position worse, before the isolation made their position worse, before age and diminishment and the arithmetic of a farm running short on labor made their position worse. The rifle had been near the door ever since. Clara had come out of the barn with a fence post iron. She had not been brandishing it. She had simply been carrying it the way you carry a tool when you have been using it. She stood beside her grandfather and looked at Holloway and said nothing, which was, in its way, the most eloquent response available. Holloway had ridden back down the drive. The rifle had stayed near the door. 3 days later, Jesse Vance turned up the drive, and the rifle came up, and Clara said, "Grandfather," and the rifle came down. And that is where this story begins, at the intersection of a man trying to take something and a stranger who had arrived. Without knowing any of it, at the exact moment something was needed. Jesse fixed the wagon wheel that first afternoon. He worked in the winter sunlight in the yard, the broken rim disassembled around him, his hands moving with the particular economy of someone who understands the material he is working with. Clara watched from the barn doorway. Silas watched from the porch for an hour, reading the hands the way a man who has worked with his own hands all his life reads other people's, looking for whether they understood what they were doing or were simply going through steps. Jesse's hands understood. That was clear within 20 minutes. The barn roof took 2 days and part of a third. Jesse worked from the first light until it was gone, and Clara worked alongside him on the second day, handing up lumber, holding the sister pieces in place while he bolted them. They did not talk much while they worked, but there were things communicated in the working, the way she anticipated what he would need next, the way he adjusted to her rhythm without pointing it out, to people figuring out how to share a space and a weight without collision. On the third morning, when the roof was done and the tools were returned to their places, Jesse came to the porch where Silas was sitting and said he was ready to move on. Silas said, "The east fence line needs resetting. The water trough in the north pasture is cracked." Same arrangement, Jesse said. And then Holloway came back. He came not on a Thursday this time, not in the careful daylight of a planned visit, but on a gray Wednesday morning when the sky had the color and weight of something building the particular quality of a Wyoming winter sky that has decided to mean business. He came with 4 men this time instead of 2, and they did not stay at the gate. They rode up the drive together. Jesse saw them from the equipment shed roof where he was working. He came down without hurrying, moving with the particular speed of someone who covers ground efficiently without looking like he is rushing. He walked around the barn and came into the yard from the south side. Silas was already on the porch, the rifle in his hands, not raised, but in his hands. Holloway pulled up in the yard and looked at the scene, the old man with the rifle, the young woman who had come out of the kitchen door with her chin up and her hands loose at her sides, and the young man who had appeared from nowhere and was now standing in the yard with the patient stillness of someone who has decided something and is waiting for the other party to understand what has been decided. 4 men behind Holloway, 3 people in front of him. He stated his purpose clearly. There was a legal matter regarding the Eastern Survey. He had retained an attorney. The matter would need to be resolved before the county land office, and in the interim, he was prepared to offer a deed of temporary management over the disputed parcel, which was he explained pleasantly. Simply a formality while the survey question was examined. Silas said, there is no disputed parcel. The survey is 40 years old and has never been contested. Holloway said, these things come to light. He said it with the pleasantness of a man who has arranged for things to come to light and is not particularly concerned about being transparent. Regarding that arrangement, Jesse said, what attorney? Holloway looked at him. It was the first time he had addressed Jesse directly. He had been treating Jesse as peripheral, as a hired hand, as someone whose presence in this scene required no particular accounting. Royce, out of Laramie, Holloway said. Jesse said, Royce has handled 2 other contested surveys in this county in the last 3 years. Both times, the original owner was elderly. Both times, the survey ambiguity appeared the season before a significant forced sale. He said this plainly, without heat, in the way he said most things. I know because one of them was my father's farm. A silence settled over the yard. It was the particular silence that settles when something has been said that everyone present understands to be true, and no one has a clean answer to. The 4 men behind Holloway shifted slightly. Not retreat, just the unconscious adjustment of bodies that have registered a change in the weight of a situation. Holloway looked at Jesse for a long moment. I don't know you, he said. No, Jesse said. You don't. You work for this family. I'm a partner in this farm, Jesse said. It was the first time he had used that word. He had not yet discussed it with Silas. He said it because it was what the situation required, not a lie, not a performance, but the truth of what the 9 days of work had made true, stated clearly enough that a man like Holloway could hear it and understand its implications. Holloway looked at Silas. Silas said nothing. He looked back at Holloway the way he had been looking at difficult things for 65 years, steadily, without flinching, with the particular expression of a man who has already decided where he stands and does not anticipate revision. Holloway looked at Clara. Clara looked at Holloway with the clear gray eyes she had gotten from her mother and said nothing at all, which was the most complete answer she could have given. Holloway folded his offer back into his coat pocket. He said he would be in touch through his attorney. He rode back down the drive. His 4 men followed. The yard was quiet again, the winter sun coming through the clouds and lying flat and pale across the frozen ground. The 3 of them stood in it for a moment without speaking. Then Silas lowered the rifle. He looked at Jesse. Partner, he said. The word measured, examined. You said partner? Yes, Jesse said. We haven't discussed that. No, Jesse said. We should. They went inside. That is when Jesse told them about his father. His father had died in the spring of 1881. Jesse had been 19. 8 weeks after the funeral, a man named Garrett had arrived with a survey question. The same kind of ambiguity that Royce was now raising about the Miller eastern boundary. Jesse had been too young and too grieved to recognize the pattern. He had tried to fight it, lost, and had been walking ever since. Nora sat across from him and did not look away. When he finished, she said, she got up and refilled his coffee, which was the most complete answer available. Silas set his coffee cup down. He said, my son Thomas would have been 43, diphtheria, 1879. Clara was 8. Jesse said nothing. He understood that nothing was the right thing to say. Silas said, partner means you don't leave when the winter gets long or when Holloway comes back. It means if this farm has a future, you are part of it. If it fails, you fail with it, Jesse said. That's what I'm agreeing to. Silas picked up his coffee. That was the conversation. The partnership agreement was drafted the following week and filed with the county recorder in Laramie. The clerk stamped it and entered it in the ledger without comment. Jesse had insisted on the filing before anything else, not because Silas had asked for it, but because he understood from his own experience that the difference between a working arrangement and a legally protected one was precisely the difference between what Garrett had been able to do to him and what Holloway would now find considerably more difficult to do to the Millers. The Eastern Boundary Survey was commissioned independently through a surveyor in Cheyenne, who had no connection to Royce or to Holloway Holdings. The surveyor came out on a Tuesday in late November, a methodical man with careful instruments, and spent the better part of a day walking the eastern line. He found what Silas had always known. The original survey was 40 years old, legally executed, and contained no ambiguity that had not been resolved at the time of the original filing. He delivered his written report to Silas on a Thursday. Silas read it at the kitchen table and set it down and said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "I knew it." He said it quietly, not with triumph, just with the relief of a man who has known something for a long time and has now had it confirmed by someone else's careful instruments. Clara filed the survey report with the county recorder the following Monday, alongside the partnership agreement. She rode into Laramie alone and came back in the late afternoon with the certified copies and set them on the table and said, "Done." She had the particular economy of expression that came from spending 20 years watching her grandfather, who had always done things and then said the minimum necessary to confirm that they had been done. Royce's letter arrived 3 weeks later. It came in the same kind of cream-colored envelope that Holloway's representatives favored the stationery of professionalism deployed as a form of pressure. The implication being that any arrangement this formally presented must be taken seriously. The letter cited the survey ambiguity. It cited the county land office's interest in reviewing the eastern boundary filing. It suggested, pleasantly, that the matter could be resolved efficiently if the Miller family was willing to negotiate. Jesse read it at the kitchen table on a Saturday evening, Clara reading her book beside the lamp, Nora mending by the stove, Silas in his chair with his eyes closed in the particular rest of a man conserving energy. Jesse got up and found paper. He wrote 3 pages. He cited the independent survey and its date, and the name of the surveyor and the surveyor's credentials. He cited the county recorder's certification of the eastern boundary. He cited 2 prior contested surveys, handled by Royce's firm. He knew about these from conversations he had sought out in Laramie with a clerk at the land office who had been there long enough to remember patterns that had both preceded forced sales of properties owned by elderly single individuals. He did not make accusations. He described. He arranged the facts in their proper sequence and let the sequence speak for itself. Clara read the draft when he was done. She made 2 corrections, a date and a territorial legal citation she had looked up in a volume of Wyoming law her grandfather kept on the shelf. The spine cracked from use. Jesse incorporated both without comment. He appreciated her corrections the way he appreciated any honest reading of a thing he had made, not as criticism but as the completion of the work. He sent the letter. Royce did not respond. Holloway did not send another representative that winter. The winter settled in around the Miller farm, the way Wyoming winters do, not with drama, but with commitment. The kind of cold that installs itself in the walls and the ground and the morning air and does not apologize for any of it. January brought 3 weeks where the daily work of feeding the cattle and breaking the ice on the water troughs required planning rather than routine. The cattle needed checking twice a day. The woodpile required constant restocking. The north fence, which Jesse had repaired in the fall, needed to posts reset after a cold snap drove them loose. He and Silas worked the posts on a January morning so cold that the air itself seemed to have crystallized. They worked without speaking, which was how they worked most of the time now, not from unfamiliarity, but from the opposite, from knowing each other's rhythm well enough that speech was redundant. Silas held the post, Jesse drove it. They moved to the next one. On the way back to the house, Silas said, "My son and I used to do this fence every January." He said it the way he said most things about Thomas, not with the performance of grief, but with the simple directness of someone placing a fact in its proper location. Jesse said, "I know." Silas looked at him. Jesse said, "The way you hold the post, you're used to someone taller." Silas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Yes." They walked back to the house. Nora watched the 2 of them from the kitchen window. She had been watching Jesse in the way she watched everything that mattered to her, with the full attention of a woman who understands that the important things in life rarely announce themselves as important. She had said very little to anyone about what she thought of Jesse Vance, which was characteristic. She had, however, put an extra blanket in his room in October without being asked, and had begun making enough coffee for 4 cups in the morning instead of 3, and had stopped warning Clara not to overtax herself in the cold, because Clara was no longer working in the cold alone. These were the ways Nora Miller said things she did not say. February brought a blizzard that lasted 4 days. On the 3rd night, the youngest cow, a 3-year-old Jessie, had named Patience on account of her temperament, went into labor. Jessie woke to the sound of her and was in the barn within 4 minutes. Clara arrived 2 minutes after that, having heard the same sound from a different direction. They worked by lantern light for 6 hours, while the blizzard drove snow against the barn walls, and the temperature inside dropped and Patience labored. With the particular determination of a creature who has no alternative to the work she is doing, the calf came through at 3 in the morning, impossibly small, already attempting to stand. Patience came through. Jessie and Clara sat down on opposite sides of the stall, with their backs against the barn wall, and did not move for a while. The lantern between them was the only warmth in the space. After a time, Clara said, "You named her Patience." Jessie said, "She has it," Clara said. "Most cows don't get named," Jessie said. "Most cows don't need to." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My grandfather named every horse he ever owned. He stopped after my parents died," he said. "It seemed sentimental." Jessie looked at her. He said, "What did he call the last one?" She said, "Margaret." She paused. "That was my grandmother's name." He said it was practical, 2 things needing 1 word. She almost smiled. He said it the way he says things that aren't practical at all. Jessie said, "That sounds about right." She looked at him across the stall. The calf between them was finding its legs. The wobbling insistence of something that has just decided to exist in the world and intends to take the decision seriously, she said. Why this farm, specifically? There were other farms on that road. He thought about it in the way he thought about things that deserved honest consideration rather than the first available answer. He said, "The wheel and the roof." "I could see what needed doing," she said. "You could see that at other farms," he said. "Yes," she said. "So why this one?" The lantern between them flickered. Outside, the blizzard continued its committed work against the barn walls. He said, "This one looked like it wanted to be saved." She looked at him. She said, "Most places do, if you look at them the right way." He said, "No, most places just need work. That's different." He paused. "A place that wants to be saved has a particular quality. You can see it in how the fences are kept, even when everything else is getting away from you. In whether the garden got planted even in a hard year. In whether the people inside still get up in the morning and do the work, even when doing the work isn't enough." Clara was quiet for a moment. She said, "My grandfather gets up at 4:30 every morning. He has since before I can remember," Jessie said. "I know. I've been watching." She looked at him with the full, clear attention that she gave things she was trying to understand. Then she looked at the calf. She said, "It does want to be saved," Jessie said. "I know. That's why I'm here." They sat in the barn until the calf was steady on its feet and Patience had settled into the particular calm of an animal that hath done the hard thing and come through it. Then they went back to the house, through the blizzard, into the warmth, and did not speak about the conversation. They did not need to. Some things are said once, accurately, and that is sufficient. Silas was awake when they came in. He looked at them in the lamplight, cold, flushed, and tired, and said, "Both of them," Jessie said. "Both." The calf's on its feet. Silas said, "Patience," Jessie said. "Patience." Silas nodded. He poured 2 cups of coffee and set them on the table without a word, and went back to his room, which was the most complete response available, and they understood it as such. The spring came slowly, the way it always does in Wyoming, not arriving so much as negotiating, a degree at a time. The snow retreating from the lower pastures while it held its ground on the ridgeline. The creek running high and cold with melt. The cattle moving differently in the mornings, restless with the season changing underneath them. Jessie and Silas worked the east fence line together through March, resetting the posts the frost had heaved and restringing wire where the winter tension had taken its toll. They worked in the near silence that had become their ordinary mode, not from unfamiliarity but from its opposite. Silas talked when he had something worth saying, which was not infrequent. He talked about the soil in the eastern section, which had a different quality from the rest of the farm, denser, slower to warm in spring, better for certain crops if you knew how to work it. He talked about the cattle, which ones had the better temperament for the high pasture in summer, and which ones needed watching. He talked about the weather off the mountains, which signs to read and which to ignore, the particular formations that meant snow and the ones that only looked like they did. Jesse listened and remembered. He had always been a good listener. It was one of the qualities that had made him vulnerable to Garrett. He had listened too carefully to a man whose honesty he had overestimated, and it was one of the qualities that was making him invaluable here. The same capacity in the presence of a man who deserved it was a different thing entirely. There were mornings when the light came across the valley in a way that made Jesse set down his tools and simply look. The mountains white against the blue, the fields coming back into green, the particular vivid green of Wyoming spring that does not last long but is extraordinary while it lasts. The creek catching the light and throwing it back, the cattle moving in the lower pasture, patience among them, thriving. He had not stopped to look at a landscape in 2 years. He had been moving to continuously to afford the pause. Stopping to look at something required believing you would be in the same place tomorrow to look at it again, and that belief had been missing from his life since October of 1881. He had it now, Silas noticed. He did not comment on it directly. He was not a man who commented on things directly when the thing itself was sufficiently clear but once. On a March morning, when Jesse had paused on the fence line and was looking east toward the mountains, Silas came and stood beside him and looked at the same thing for a moment. Then he said, "It doesn't look like much in winter." Jesse said, "It looks like enough." Silas said, "Yes." He picked up his wire stretcher and went back to work. There was the afternoon in late March when Clara came out to the fence line with cold biscuits and salt pork, the same thing she brought Silas every afternoon wrapped in cloth. She handed Jesse his portion and turned to go back. He said, "Miss Clara." She turned. He said, "Your grandfather's right hip. He favors it on the upswing. If we set the block at a different angle, he won't have to twist as far on the drive." She was quiet. She said, "I know about the hip," he said. "I know you do." She waited. He said, "He won't mention it. He thinks mentioning it is the same as complaining, and he doesn't complain." He paused. "I just wanted you to know, I noticed, and that I've been adjusting how we work to account for it." She looked at him for a moment with the full, direct attention she brought to things she was deciding how to think about. She said, "He'll notice that you've adjusted," Jesse said. "Probably," she said. "He won't say anything about it either," Jesse said. "I know," she said, "but he'll know that you saw it, and that will matter to him more than if you'd said something directly." She paused. "He's that kind of man," Jesse said. "I've gathered that." A silence. The Wyoming winter light lay flat and cold across the field between them. She said, "Thank you." She went back to the house. Jesse watched her go, then turned back to the fence post he had been driving. He set the block at the angle he had described, not because Silas was watching, because Silas wasn't, but because it was the right adjustment. And adjusting was what you did when you were paying attention. At the kitchen window, Nora watched her come across the field and watched the particular quality of stillness that Clara had when she was thinking about something she had not yet decided to say. Nora turned back to the stove. She had been watching these small moments accumulate for 4 months. She had not said anything about them to anyone. Some things are better understood than named. The evenings had changed too, not dramatically, not in any way that a stranger would have noticed, but the rhythm of the kitchen after supper, which had been for 6 years since Thomas and Ellen died. The quiet rhythm of 3 people managing the particular silence of a family that had lost its center had shifted. Jesse sat at the table after supper with his coffee and did not try to fill the space with conversation, which was the right instinct, but his presence filled it differently than absence had. And the difference was felt by everyone without being acknowledged by anyone. Clara read. Nora mended. Silas sat in his chair and occasionally talked about things worth talking about. Jesse listened, or worked through something in his head, or occasionally asked a question about the farm. The kind of question that comes from paying attention rather than from making conversation. The evening settled around all four of them, and the settling had a quality it had not had before. One evening in April, after Nora and Clara had gone to bed, Silas and Jesse sat by the dying fire. Silas said, "I want to talk about the summer." Jesse said, "All right." Silas laid out his plan, the crop rotation, the high pasture, the cattle. When he finished, he said, "I want to know what you think." Jesse said three things. A different timing for the eastern section rotation. It warmed late, and planting too early would cost them yield. The north pasture fence needed reinforcing before the summer cattle moved. He had seen the weak section in March. The cattle plan was sound, and he had nothing to add. Silas said, "You're right about the north fence. I've been putting it off," he said. "You think the way a farmer thinks," Jesse said. "I had a good teacher for a while," Silas said. "I know." He paused. "What I told you about Thomas, about what he would have thought of you, that was not a sentimental statement." "I don't make sentimental statements," Jesse said. "I know that," Silas said. "It was an accurate observation," he said. "I'll take care of this place," Silas said. "I know you will. That's why I said it." On a clear morning in April, Jesse found Clara sitting on the porch steps with her coffee, looking out at the valley. He sat on the step below her. The morning was very bright and very clear. Below them, the creek caught the light, and in the lower pasture, Patience, thriving now. Her coat, filling out in the spring warmth, was moving through the new grass with the ease of an animal entirely at home. Clara said, "My grandfather trusts you," Jesse said. "I know," she said. "He doesn't trust easily. You know that by now," he said. "Yes," she said. "What he offered you, the partnership, the room. It wasn't just practical," he said. "I know that too." She looked out at the valley. She said, "I've been here my whole life. I don't know if that's a limitation or just a fact," he said. "Probably both." She looked at him. He was looking at the mountains. She said, "Do you miss your farm?" He thought about this with the seriousness it deserved. He said, "I miss what I thought it was going to be, not what it was. The idea of it." He paused. "My father used to talk about what the place would look like in 20 years. He had plans. He would draw them sometimes on the back of whatever paper was available, where he wanted the new barn to go, how he was going to rotate the eastern fields." He paused again. "I never got to see any of it," Clara said. "What happened to the drawings?" Jesse said. "I don't know. They were in the house when I signed it over. I didn't think to take them." He said this without bitterness, just as a fact about a 20-year-old who had been grieving and not thinking clearly. "I've thought about that since." Jesse said, "I don't know. They were in the house when I signed it over. I didn't think to take them." He said this without bitterness, just as a fact about a 20-year-old who had been grieving and not thinking clearly. "I've thought about that since." "The drawings." She looked at him. She said, "I have drawings too. My father made them. Plans for a new water system, and where he wanted to put a second well." She paused. "He never started on any of it. He died the winter after he made them," Jesse said. "Where are they?" she said. "In the cedar box under my grandfather's bed. He kept them. He kept everything of Thomas's." Jesse looked at the valley. He said, "Maybe some of it is still doable." She looked at him. She said, "The second well," he said. "The ground in the northeast corner has a particular quality when it rains. The way the water moves. It suggests something below. I don't know enough about it to be certain, but it's worth looking at." Clara was quiet for a moment. She said, "You noticed that?" He said, "Yes." She said, "My father noticed it too. It's in the drawings." A silence settled between them, the particular silence of two people who have just discovered that they have been seeing the same thing from different directions and have arrived, without knowing it, at the same place. Below them, Patience moved through the spring grass, entirely at home. Jesse said, "Clara." She turned. He said, "I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him for a long moment, not with surprise, but with the particular attention of someone receiving a confirmation of something they had already begun to believe. Then she looked back at the valley. She said, "I know." She paused. "I've known for a while." She stood up and went inside. Jesse sat on the step for a while longer, looking at the mountains. Silas came out behind him and sat down in the chair above and to the left, in the way that old men sit in the morning when the sun is right and the season has finally arrived at something bearable. They sat for a while without speaking. Then Silas said, "My son used to say a farm is just land until somebody decides to love it. Then it's something else," Jesse said. "I know. You told me," Silas said. "I told you once," Jesse said. "Once was enough." Silas looked at the mountains. He said, "Thomas would have liked you." He paused. "I want you to know that." Jesse looked at the valley below, the creek and the pasture, and the new grass coming, and the cattle moving in the morning light, and thought about a man he had never met and would never meet, whose farm this was before it was Silas's, and whose daughter it was, whose daughter was now Clara, and the long chain of it, the way one life connects to another, through the land they share and the losses they survive, and the mornings they get up and do the work regardless. He said, "I'll take care of it," Silas said. "I know you will." They sat in the morning sun and watched the valley come into spring. That is how it ended, and how it began, because those are not always different things. Jesse Vance came to the Miller farm looking for one night and one meal, and stayed for the rest of his life. Clara found in him what she had been looking for, without knowing she was looking. Someone who saw the farm the way she saw it, who understood its value in terms that actually mattered, who would be there in the morning, and the morning after, and the morning after that. And Jesse found what he had been carrying the absence of for 2 years, a place that would still be standing when he got there. Silas and Nora grew old on that farm, in the house they had built, and the fields they had broken, and the life they had made. Their son could not come back, but something had come through the door that cold afternoon when the rifle came down, something that had turned out, in the end, to be exactly what was needed. Not a replacement. Nothing is a replacement. The world does not work that way, and anyone who has lost something real knows it. But something that arrived with its hat in its hands and water on the brim, and a willingness to work, and stood in the cold winter sun looking at a rifle without flinching, and said, "I can fix both." Just somewhere dry and something hot. And a girl had said one word, and the rifle had come down, and everything else had followed from that. Thank you for being here today. If this story held, you consider what it means to show up for something without being asked. Jesse Vance did not know what he was walking into when he turned up that drive. He only knew what needed doing, and he did it. Sometimes that is the whole of a beginning. Sometimes a rifle comes down, and a door opens, and what comes through it turns out to be exactly what was needed. Consider subscribing so you don't miss the next story. Until then, keep the light on the porch.